names.
Right. Good morning, friends. Welcome to Erace. I am Lynn Frank, and today I will do my best to facilitate our discussion. Fortunately, I have a good script to follow, created by all the great facilitators who came before me. Eracism is the slogan of the group Erace, which was formed in New Orleans in the summer of 1993. We seek ways through person-to-person communication to show that we are committed to treating fellow human beings of all colors with love and respect. Please join us. We also acknowledge that what we know as the United States is the traditional territory of indigenous peoples, and that there are many more nations and tribes that could be named. I checked all these names on the computer to see how to pronounce them, but if you live in that territory and have a different way, you can correct me and I'll be glad. Members of our group today are on the lands of the Tonkawa, the Lipan Apache and Comanche in Austin, the Chitimacha and Choctaw in New Orleans, the Creek and Cherokee in Atlanta, the Lenape and Piscataway in Maryland, the Wampanoag and Nipmuc people in Boston, and the Cahuilla and Mojave in Riverside County, California. Any corrections? Okay, back to my script. We thank their ancestors for being stewards of these lands through generations and hope that we can learn to be better stewards of the land ourselves. And now, we would be good for everyone to introduce himself or herself, and I will call on you in the order that I see on my screen, starting with Phyllis.
Morning, everybody. I'm Phyllis. I've been coming to Erace since 2008, and I'm going to be Lynn's timekeeper today since this is her first time, and it's always stressful when it's one's first time.
Thank you. Dee Dee.
Good morning, everybody, and happy Saturday. It's great. It's only 8 o'clock here and it's 75 degrees, so this is comfortable. It's going to be awful in about 2 hours. And so, but I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to be inside and to see all of your faces, because there's a lot of folks here. Anyway, I'm looking forward to a great discussion.
Thank you, Dee Dee. Stanton.
Sorry about that. Good morning, Stanton in Austin. Been coming to Erace for about 5 months now. Thank you.
Thank you. Francie.
Hi, I'm Francie, and I've been attending Erace probably close to 2 years now. And I'm real interested, Lynn, in how you selected this article. Before I moved to Austin in December of 2019, I lived in Fort Worth for 12 years, and I'm familiar with that building. So I'm curious.
Well, we probably can make some special contributions to the discussion. We'll be counting on you.
I don't know if anything pertinent, but we'll see.
Beatrice. Oh, Beatrice, are you ready?
Hi.
Or shall I?
I was just going to keep the cat from coming outside. Good morning, Beatrice here in East Point, Georgia. Been coming to Erace since '93. Glad to see everyone. Elementary school classmate of Marion Ladar. Yes, indeed. Old days.
Great. All these connections. It's wonderful. They're relatives and friends, and it's lovely. Nora.
Morning, everybody. I'm in Austin, and I've been coming for this past year. and I always learn something. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Nancy,
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nancy Moore. I'm in New Orleans, and I have been coming to Erace since June of 2007.
thank you. Marva,
Good morning. I'm Marva. I've been attending the Erace post Katrina, and I look forward to discussions every Saturday.
thank you. I do too. Joe,
Good Saturday morning. It's nice to see all your faces. I've been attending the Erace meetings or part of them for most of this year. I've been missing the last few weeks. My husband's had some health issues, and I may get pulled out today. But in the meantime, it's good to see all your smiling faces and hear this discussion. Thank you.
good luck to you both. Marion,
Good morning, everybody here in New Orleans in the Gentilly area. I've been attending the Erace discussion since June of 1993. As a little lanyard, Beatrice's mother, Mrs. Lillian Perry, was my 7th grade music teacher. Her father, Mr. Perry, was my high school principal, and her brother, Robert, was my sister's classmate. So we go way back. Nice to see everybody.
thank you. It's always good to get history from people who have lived in New Orleans a long time and have so many connections. Pedro,
Hey, good morning and congratulations, Lynn, on being our fearless leader tonight. You're doing a great job. I appreciate your concern to pronounce the Indian tribes correctly. I would never even want to approach the subject. Anyhow, I'm from Austin or the Austin area. I've been coming the last couple of years, and as always, look forward to the reflections and education I get each Saturday. Thank you.
thank you, Pedro. Jean,
I'm Jean Walker. I live in Silver Spring, Maryland, and we have the Piscataway as well as the Lumbee people. And Lumbee still have a large contingency in Baltimore, Maryland, and meeting centers, and they're very well organized. I also have a connection to Beatrice. I have been attending Erace in Atlanta for a couple of years, I believe. And my sister, Barbara, was a member, and she told me about it. She lives in Atlanta. And then I joined, and then Beatrice told me, told us about New Orleans. So there we are, lots of connections. And it's wonderful to see everybody again today. Thank you.
thank you, Jean. Larry,
Good morning, I'm Larry. Good to be here. And I'm glad we acknowledged the original land of the various Indian tribes, and that's good. But I wish somehow that we would have found a way to acknowledge the evil institution of slavery as America's original sin. So I'm glad to be here this morning.
thank you, Larry. I think the acknowledgement of slavery as America's original sin maybe runs through all of our discussions, but it doesn't hurt to make it more clearly at times. Thank you. Cheryl,
Thank you, Lynn. I'm not quite ready to do facilitation, so I so appreciate you at this point. Good morning, everyone. Glad to be here. Have been with you from before Katrina for just a bit, and then joined in when COVID hit and we went to Zoom. Larry, I really appreciate everything you say. I would have to say, though, is that the original sin? Or would the sin that we came here and we destroyed the very people that had a civilization that was quite nice first? So we have several sins. And I'm looking forward to the discussion. And I really do want to hear from you about where, what it was like to live with this building in your town.
There are enough sins to go around, aren't there? Louise.
Oh, yes, there are. I have been a member of Erace. You can't hear me? You can? No?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. I've been coming since the mid 90s on and off in New Orleans. And then after Katrina, we moved here to Austin. And I'm sorry, Lynn, I said that I was going to be your timekeeper, but I ran out of time. I'm doing laundry and shopping and sorry, I tried to do too much before the meeting. So I think Phyllis is doing that, right?
I'm in good hands, I know.
Yeah, you are. Good.
Thank you, Louise. The order of photos has jumped around, but I think Teresa is next.
All right. There I am. Hi.
Are you new to us today, Teresa?
Yes, today is my first day. I was invited by Nora. Nora and I were in the same book club called the Colors Book Club, which we talked about books on racism, and she told me about Erace. And I used to live in Austin, and I relocated to North Carolina because I got priced out of Austin. That's another conversation. But I'm really happy to be here. I'm going to keep my camera off, though, because I'm actually putting together a desk as we speak, as I'm listening in. But
welcome.
Thank you.
We hope that you'll have a moment between desk putting together to comment.
Yeah, I'm usually not shy, but right. I'll
Okay.
definitely unmute myself, but not turn my camera back on after this. I just wanted everybody to see my face at least once during this discussion.
We actually ask that everybody stays muted throughout unless they're called on to
Commenting.
talk. Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing.
Louise, did you've already talked. I'm very sorry. You can see already that I'm overwhelmed by my task. Greer.
Good morning. My name is Greer. I've been attending the race since 2008.
Thank you, Greer. Glenn.
My name is Glenn Abdullah. Been attending race since 1994. And I'm also 1/8 Choctaw. And I want you white folks to give me back my property.
Well, that's a good idea to the extent that it's possible. I heard this morning on the radio about the Nez Perce Indians in Montana who were buying back property in Washington state so they could have their traditional ceremonies and live there. And I said to myself, they shouldn't have to buy that property. It should be given to them as reparations. But that's another story. Has everyone spoken? Oh, okay,
So-
good. Let me see what's next on the agenda. The format of the meeting is very important to ensure the safety and respect of all participants. As Phyllis said, we keep ourselves on mute so there are no dog barks, telephone calls, and extraneous noises. We keep a list. If you want to talk, raise one finger, and it's good to move it around so that it can be seen. Doesn't blend into the background. And you will speak in the order that you appear on the list. You will have 2 minutes to make your comments. Respect the speakers who came before you. We make no side comments to others. Certainly, no one would participate in personal attacks or call names. But remember, the point of the discussion is to listen and learn, not to argue. We also have an opportunity to ask clarifying questions. If you want a clarification of something someone said, put up 2 fingers and probably move them around still, although 2 are easier to see than 1. And it should be a brief question, no monologue or statement to precede it. And it should be a genuine clarifying question, such as, can you clarify what you meant when you said anti-disestablishmentarianism or something like that? Don't use it to propound your opinions. If you try to do that, we will probably put you on the list for a 2-minute talk, but in order. Whereas the clarifying question is out of order. It just follows the speaker who came before you. All right, Francie. I grew up in Texas. I grew up in Houston. And so the Fort Worth caught my eye. But also I brought this article because it shows the good things that can happen when different groups band together to fill a need in the community. There are 2 parts to the racism issue. One part is to excavate and understand all the horrible, insidious ways racism has poisoned our country since its beginning. But the other part of the racism question is one that Cindy raises so often: what can we do about it? So this is an example of people doing something. I was also very interested in the involvement of Opal Lee in this creation of this new community space. The Juneteenth holiday was not her only project. She was involved in this project from the beginning. And I particularly loved her quote. She said, "People are willing to be a part of doing something about our past, learning from it instead of letting it overwhelm them and making sure that it doesn't happen again." All right, I've got my screen back now. If you want to raise 1 finger to talk, I will start keeping the list. Oh, Francie, goodness, great. And Beatrice? Okay, Francie.
Well, first I need to clarify that I only was aware of the use of the building, I should say, right before I left Fort Worth at the end of 2019. And it caught my interest. I don't know where I saw the article about it, but I did. You go by the building, it doesn't say anything about the KKK on the outside. So it was just kind of an abandoned building that lies between the business district of Fort Worth and the stockyards, which is the kind of the attraction of Fort Worth for tourists, where they walk the cattle up and down the street and do various things in the stockyards area. But I did go to their website and I copied off a comment that's published on the website that says this is the opportunity to connect the past and present, interpret history through the power of place, engage the public in programs that stimulate dialogue on pressing social issues, share opportunities for public action on the issues raised at the site, and promote universal cultures of human rights. And I thought that was a nice statement by a woman who's the executive director of the International Coalition of Sites of Conscience, which intrigued me, but I couldn't find any more about that. But the part of that quote that piqued my interest was interpret history through the power of place. And I reflected on that and thought how moving it is to be where something happened as you think about it versus sitting in your living room thinking about it. And the power of place was just something that I wanted anybody else that has a comment about that to say something, but it was moving to me. So,
thank you, Francie, for looking up the mission statement of the group. It is a fabulous statement.
Mm-hmm.
Beatrice?
Yeah, I just wanted to begin by saying how encouraging this is and to get some good news in the midst of so much pain that we always carry about race. It's just good to look at things in a different perspective and know what can happen. It was encouraging. It's one quote I thought was so helpful: acknowledging racial injustice and allowing the people who were affected to reclaim a space, kind of what Francie's saying, in a way that reflects their agency and their resistance by amplifying their voices rather than those of the perpetrators. I think that is so very important. People who are striving to take down, those of us, for example, especially New Orleans, taking down monuments, have to also be able to reclaim spaces and decide what needs to be done with them. We no longer need to honor people who committed treason, who were fighting to maintain slavery. We don't need to honor that and then just take down the physical honoring, the visible honoring, and not do something. I think, for example, the naming of Jefferson Davis Parkway, I think it was Jefferson Davis Parkway, for Norman Francis. I just think there's a lot we can do that is growth producing, that doesn't re-traumatize people, but that allows history to be repeated so that we are informed, but have it reflect how we treat one another and offer a future, a positive growth producing future. I was very encouraged by this, and I'm glad these people were able to combine and do this wonderful thing of repurposing this terrible place and for something good. And just, it was spirit lifting, because so much can hurt you now. So that's me.
Thank you, Beatrice. Oops, I'm looking for some fingers. Ah, good, Jean.
I must admit that when I saw the title, I thought, oh, no, we should just burn this down. But I really am glad that you gave us this article to read. I agree with everyone. And I think the fact that everybody came together, and including Mr. Rouse's great-grandson or great-great-grandson who had been lynched, and it's being named in his honor. He is on the board and a member of the group too. So I thought that was wonderful. And I agree, we cannot go forward until we recognize and deal with the past. We can only do our best, but in Maryland, we just have commemorative plaques. We don't have anything like this, but I shall keep my eyes open. So thank you, Lynn.
Lynn, Larry had his finger up.
Yes, Larry. We need you to unmute, please.
And Glenn has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Jean mentioned something I was going to bring up, that some things might be best to be burned down. And this particular building may have been one of them. You know, we have meetings like this, I'm sure, in just about every city across America of some type, where Blacks and white men and women, Indians, natives, Mexicans are getting together talking about, you know, race and the past and this nation's history. And in spite of it all, we are here in 2022 on the brink of some type of civil war. You know, has all of these discussions, you know, been in vain? And what radical thought or idea can change the direction of this nation, if it's possible right now? You know, Martin Luther King once said about church buildings, that I have traveled the length and breadth of Alabama, Mississippi, and all the other southern states on sweltering summer days and crisp autumn mornings. I have looked at the South's beautiful churches with their lofty spires pointing heavenward. I have beheld the impressive outlines of her massive religious education buildings, and over, I have found myself asking, what kind of people worship here? Who is their God? So within the framework of this building, you know, I would hope that a radical work would be done. And, you know, so that, you know, men and women of goodwill can just continue to fight the good fight to try to make this nation a better nation. But a group of historians met with President Obama, Biden at the White House recently and said, when a nation loses faith in elections, democracy is dead. And I think this nation has lost faith in elections. Thank you.
Glenn had his hand up.
Oh, I'm
and
sorry, and Cheryl.
Cheryl does. And Dee Dee.
Okay.
Who's next?
Glenn, I'm sorry.
I'm next?
Yes.
Glenn Abdullah, yes, please.
Okay. I am beyond slavery. That's behind me. I'm beyond Jim Crow. That's behind me. I'm not, my soul is not living in the past. We'll be helped more if we had more people to talk to us about leaving those things behind. And I know what the emotional people are going to say. Well, if you forget history, you know, you're doomed to repeat it over again. I wish we would repeat some of the history of the past, some of our successes, instead of just thinking about the things that scarred our souls, and think about what we were doing that was successful in the past that we have not brought into the future. And stop. We should be right now. Where my mindset I have now is I want to help America in this day and time when America is going to, when people are trying to destroy it. That's where my mindset is at. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Glenn. Cheryl.
Well, I have to say that when I first looked at this article and I saw that building, I was sickened by it. I have a very hard time, Glenn, you'll appreciate this because I'm whamsy-pamsy, is I have a hard time kind of sometimes even going into people's buildings, like when friends would buy places in the French Quarter in the 80s, then the backs of them hadn't been touched. The slave quarters sometimes made me want to go vomit. And it wasn't because there was anything there. It was just like, you know, this is the whamsy-pamsy part of me. I'm a massage therapist. It was like a vibrational thing. So it's interesting to me on how they would cleanse this, because there's a lot of things that, you know, fall into the field of work that I do that have to talk about vibrational patterns. So be so interesting. Be great to follow this building and see what happens in the future to know more about how it progresses. And that's really, I guess, all I have to say.
Nancy. Dee Dee. And I did notice Beatrice and Nancy.
When I read this article, like Beatrice said, it was a totally uplifting article. First thing, it's a novelty that, I mean, the Klan has been around forever. The Klan is even in California, okay? You do have to know where they are to find them because they do hide. But most of the Klan activity, when it was real active, was done at night. They met at night in a house or a location that nobody could find unless you knew where it was. And they were very, very secretive. So to find this building out in the open, that is so large and everybody knew what it was, that is a novelty. So what they're doing with that building to completely repurpose it for good is amazing, because there aren't that many of those kind of facilities that have that kind of history that are gonna lend themselves to doing that, you know, because it is a very large building. It can do a lot of good. And I say move forward with great speed, because this is wonderful. I'm done.
Thank you, Dee Dee. Beatrice, and I put Pedro on the list too.
And Larry and Louise.
Thank you.
I guess two things. One is that remembering, commemorating, taking a view of history is not mutually exclusive to looking at resilience, strength, and moving forward. It's not an either or. It's not an either or. It has to be both. Our Jewish brothers and sisters are wonderful at remembering their past. The Seder meal, the whole meal is predicated on, you know, what happened, what we ate then, what it meant then, how we ate with our loins, dirt.
Oh, Beatrice, we're losing you.
All of that. And even now in Germany, there are what are called stumble stones, where the Holocaust, their names are on little stones. And so that when people pass those dwellings, they can remember that these people were killed during the Holocaust, but they lived here. They were human beings who lived here. I think we can do both. The resiliency of the African people has to be celebrated. The fact that we have survived and have gotten had to do as much as we have. And it is right that we should be reminded of that, and we should have the tools to move forward. But we have to know, for example, about Reconstruction and what we were able to do in that short period of time after the end of our enslavement, what we were able to accomplish in that short period of time until 1877. Had they just left us alone to do what we could with the resources that we were able to garner, our own personal resources, our strength, our integrity, all of that. And we cannot just say that was then and so it's over and let's don't think about it. That's a part of who we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice. Greer, I'm adding you to the list. And our next speaker is Nancy.
Do you see Glenn? He has his hand up.
Oh, that was Glenn who had his hand up. I'm sorry. I thought. Greer, did you have your hand up? With Glenn.
No, I didn't have my hand up.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. Okay, the next person is Nancy, please.
Okay. I think it's I don't know, interesting thing that what they turned around and did with that building. I would have been more in favor of tearing it down, but that was an alternative and an interesting alternative for what they did with it. But my question, probably in response to Glenn and to the whole group about moving America forward or saving America, or however you termed it, Glenn, didn't the Ku Klux Klan think that they were saving America? Didn't they think that they were restoring order to America the way that in their mind that they thought it should be? Isn't that what's going on right now with the certain conservative, right-wing conservative fraction of the Republican Party, which is dominating the Republican Party at this point? and everything that's going on now? That's just a question that, I'm posing to the group and in response to Glenn's statement. That's it.
A big question, Nancy. Pedro.
Yeah, I had a couple of things. One was I can remember in the very early 1980s, or it might have been the late 70s, there was a KKK march that came to Austin. They were granted a marching permit, and we were told, do not come out and protest it because you'll just give more legitimacy to them. But so many of us did come out anyhow because we just couldn't stand the idea of being silent in such a atrocious deal. I don't know why I'm sharing that, but it's just not just Fort Worth. This is Austin, Texas, liberal city of Texas. But I also, when Glenn talks about slavery being a thing of the past, we've had this discussion before, but I think it's worth repeating that racism, it's a learned behavior. I honestly really believe that in my core. And so what we have in our culture that creates that is really worth re-examining. And it's very alive and well in the 21st century, not just when there was slavery. And, when you look at the new forms and the new manifestations of oppression of racism, it takes its form in the subprime interest rates in the 21st century. Other obstacles to African Americans include the racial wealth divide that's incredibly skewed in favor of and against African Americans and reproduces itself. And 21st century, just get educated. Well, that's a myth too. In 21st century, had a black households that had a college degree had 33% less wealth than a head of household white family that was headed by a high school dropout. So if we don't acknowledge that racism is alive and well and continues to reproduce itself, then we're doing a disservice to those that are most afflicted by it, no matter how hard they try to overcome it. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. Larry.
These discussions are never about reliving slavery, not in the wildest stretch of an imagination, but they're about remembering from whence we've come, what made this nation what it is, how the wealth of this nation was built, how democracy was never afforded justly to the Black community. So it would be good, and I know that there might be some who think like Glenn and say, well, let's just forget slavery and move on. But when we look at the broader, the broader effects instead of our own comfort zone, we must look at the broader effects and how it has affected this nation to this very day and is moving forward even as I speak with these things that's gone on. It would do well if, Glenn, I believe if you would read the 1619 Project and become familiar with critical race theory. And there are those in some public schools in this nation who want to take all the books referencing slavery off the library shelves. Let's just move on. Let's just get along. We can't do that. We can't do that. We must continue to remember from whence we came. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Louise.
Stanton has his finger up.
Thank you.
Larry just said what I was going to say, actually, and also Pedro. You really cannot forget history, or else we're doomed to repeat it. And as an educator, I totally agree with Larry. I mean, we're our hands are going to be tied with what we can teach, and we need to teach children real history, warts and all, you know. Very quick note, I do agree with what they did to the building. I think that's a great way of reusing it. And also on a personal note, my house that I bought with my husband in on Domain Street in Mid-City was used as a CIA investigating David Duke's house, which was next door to us. A group of fascists there, that racists that lived there or had meetings there, and they would use our house to spy on it and collect information, which I thought was rather cool. And my neighbors who now live in the house, my old neighbors, are the most wonderful, beautiful, happy family. They've brought joy, goodwill, and they're the most amazing people. So they're utilizing what was a horrible space for horrible deeds into a lovely, wonderful, loving space. I guess that's about it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Glenn, I've got you down on the list again.
For all those who misunderstand what I'm saying, I'm not saying that we don't, that we should erase the history of slavery. No, what I'm just saying is that don't be living it today. It's like it just happened yesterday. And I don't care what you saying about what how far we behind white people in economics and all that other stuff. They're not holding us back from economics. We're holding ourselves back from equality with them, because we go to them to put our money in their banks. We go to them marching on Washington, begging them to give us a job, when the 40 million or 50 million of us in America has needs that we could provide the businesses to take care of their needs, but we won't do it. We have the money to accumulate, to put people in business. We could open our own banks, but we won't do it. And that's why the white man called the black man a boy, because you're coming to him and begging him for your needs that you can take care of yourself. Boy.
Thank you, Glenn. Stanton.
I'm going to withdraw my statements. I think it's okay. At this point, what I was going to say has been covered, so never mind.
Have I got any more hands? Cheryl.
Well, just to kind of fully add to the discussion, my experience of the Ku Klux Klan growing up in California was that they were there, and that actually the grand, I guess, I don't know, wizard is maybe the name for this person. So the leader actually lived in California. I'm doing a little side viewing on the internet, and it's mentioning where I was born, Tulare, California, and Visalia being the center at a certain point in history. All this stuff is before the 40s. But my experience of the Klan was driving out to Metairie when I was in my 20s, 40 years ago, and going to the store and having a full procession of Ku Klux Klan hooded members in broad daylight, stopping people for money with buckets. The other time was going to a picnic with a lot of friends in Gainesville, Florida, and that was in 1990s. where it was like a family picnic for gay people. And so some of my friends were gay family members. And so I went out to celebrate and have a picnic with them. Fortunate the police came because the Klan found out that we were going to be there, and they came out in complete regalia. I haven't seen anyone in regalia since 1990. The article that we just looked at last week, was it? No, the week before when I was present, on that group of youth that was showing themselves around the country is, a current brand. I guess, I'm listening to everyone and hearing everyone's good comments about that building. And I'm opening up to, that it could be cleansed and used again. I used to go to a church in Oakland, the First Congregationalist Church in Oakland, and they actually had desensitizing meetings, which was absolutely phenomenal to me because you could walk past and see it happening, where people that look like what you would consider full-blown rednecks, right? White men with beards and plaid shirts on in their jeans going through talk therapy with different people of that church to learn. So that would be a nice thing if that building also allowed that to happen.
Louise, Marion, Pedro, B.
So Cheryl just reminded me of what I wanted to comment on as well was I lived in a slaves quarters on Royal Street, and they advertised them as slaves quarters because, I mean, that's a fact, and it describes the size and shape of the building that you're going to be renting. And I do agree, bad vibes, and I am too also very much into, the feelings of place. It was one of the most peaceful, lovely apartments I've ever had, to be honest. It was beautiful. So the fact that they call them slaves quarters, is just a fact to describe the shape and the size of the apartment that you're applying for. That's it.
Well, perhaps people would care to comment on that, the use of the term in our day and time. There's some hard questions that we deal with. Marion.
Just a couple of seconds ago, Glenn made mention of the fact that Black people go begging. And there was some mention of how we don't have our own institutions, financial institutions. Right here in New Orleans, I'd say about a mile from where I live. Marvin knows where it is too. There is a bank called the Liberty Bank, and the president and founder of the bank is a former classmate of mine. It's called Liberty Bank and Trust. It has approximately 965 million in assets and branches in 9 states, making it one of the largest African-American owned financial institutions in the United States. Liberty Bank established its Baton Rouge presence, which is our Louisiana state capital, in 1994 and opened a 3rd branch in 2004. So Alden, that's his name, Alden McDonald. I think Beatrice knows him too. But it is one of the largest African-American financial institutions in the United States. It's not the only one, but I'm mentioning it because it's close to where I live. I pass it all the time. And I went to school with the guy who is the president.
Thank you, Marion. Pedro.
Yeah, I was just reflecting on kind of what Glenn has been saying. I think is really important too, because I think sometimes we talk past each other. I think both things can be true. You can have racism alive and well, which it is in 21st century America, and it needs to be torn down and try to figure out what creates racists and such. But at the same time, what I hear Glenn saying too is that there's a lot of activism that can happen that can improve the African-American economic condition over its current state by just buying Black, and maybe that would be a good exercise to find out what businesses, online businesses or whatever, that if I need something, I don't mind, I don't shop for price all the time. And maybe I could then, buy in that direction. And that's certainly, if we made conscious efforts to buy Black and all that, that certainly would have, I think, some type of impact on the racial wealth divide, which is my greatest concern and indication of a second-class citizenry or whatever and such. So I do think what Glenn says is really important. Is not just wallow in the reality of racism, but try to constructively fight it in some type of 21st century strategy. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you, Pedro. Beatrice.
Yeah, I greatly respect the idea and the work that is required for us as a race of people to find boots and bootstraps and pull them up. And buying Black and being involved in institutions that are owned by and cater to a larger populace, but typically to African Americans. Those are very, very important issues. And I don't think we can ever forget that it's our responsibility to support our own in business. I also think that it's an important recognition of the headwinds that have always been focused on us. The disparity, education system, for example, the funding of public schools. If you have a neighborhood like in Montgomery County, Maryland, where the property tax is wonderful, when I used to as a assistant principal there, and the funding of public schools was just over the top. But then if property values and property taxes fund the schools, what happens to places where the property taxes are low? What happens? How do you fill in that gap? What do we do? What about the funding of the safety net for people that are not able to get health insurance? There are a lot of things that the government has to do, that the federal government has to do to support its citizens. We work to build this country on our backs free. And so it's not a matter of asking for something that's not mine already. Y'all took it. You took me, and I'm going into my emotional spiel, and I really don't care. And so now you're going to blame me if I'm not able to grab onto whatever little big you try to give me. And that's my fault that I'm not able to survive and thrive when there's a disparity in salaries. It's not just numbers. And like I'm saying, it's headwinds that have always blown toward us when others have had the wind at their back and moved them forward. And like the ministers, when Sherman asked field order 15, field number 15, field order number 15, Sherman asked those ministers what they wanted. He said, give us our land and leave us alone. If you all do not want us, and we don't want to be where people don't want us, just give us some land and leave us alone. Of course, that didn't last. President Johnson came and he took back the federal. So, we've got to see where we have strived and where we've been fought back. The redlining, no opportunities to build wealth so that our children can pay for college as other families can. And our children are overwhelmed with debt from college tuitions, African American children. It's a real big picture. And wherever you come in on it, then we got to do what we can to fix it and make things better. But let's not just say that we can do it. If we just got ourselves together, we could do it. I'm sorry. That is I think it's a good dream, but I don't think it is not reality. We are owed a lot.
can I interrupt for a minute? I need to step away. Louise, can you take over the timekeeping until I get back? I'll just be gone a minute or two.
You can put me on the list.
Okay, thank you, Beatrice. And we have Jean who has a comment.
I'm
There you go.
sorry. I'm technically challenged at my age. I just, was following up on Glenn. All my doctors are non-white except for one. I do have one white doctor. I have several doctors. At 84, you get lots of doctors. I started putting my money in black banks in 1960s. We had two. The one that I put, well, originally it was Industrial Bank of Washington, and they are still in existence. I didn't look up their creds. The Independence Federal Savings and Loan, that was the one that I was one of the founding, well, not founding, one of the first group. When they first opened, I started right away. That's when I learned about redlining, and I knew that they had not been involved in that. So the other thing is that there was a white man on the board who just created a lot of havoc and ended up taking over the bank, and now it's a white bank. Really irritated me. I pulled out. It's hard to find other institutions in my area. Industrial Bank is not too close. And I cater to non-white businesses. I mean, I know how hard it is to be able to get there. I come from very modest means, but I'm white, and I was blessed. And I was able to persevere. I mean, my mother was a maid, live-in maid at 15. Her mother put her out. My dad was an orphan, and he was taken in by a classmate's family when he was in high school. You know, I mean, we didn't have much, but I think that putting our money where our mouth is a really positive thing to do. It's one of the many, many things to do, you know. And I agree with Beatrice. This country, you own this country. You built this country. White people, didn't build this country. African Americans did. You can go around to any of these buildings here in DC, almost any one of them, and know who built them. The ones that are standing, the Capitol, the White House, anyway. So unless we all get together and fight it all, it's the next generation that's going to be able to do it, our children, our grandchildren, hopefully. But we have to keep resisting. Thank you. I know I get too emotional.
Well, it's an overwhelming problem, and you're right to be emotional. Glenn.
I think who that was, Maria. She brung up Liberty Bank. I bank at Liberty Bank also. And she said that it has a deposits up to 900, or either they have assets up to $900 million. That's not $1 billion. And they got banks from here to Baton Rouge, but they're not being really supported by the population that's in Louisiana. Now you take like Capital One, they got $432 billion in assets. And you know who put a lot of their money in Capital One? We do. Yeah. So we are not shouldering our responsibility. We are not competing. We just throw our hands up and keep making this foolish concept that they owe us. As though as though one day the government of America is going to pay you. All right. How do you expect to get paid? Are you going to get paid? All right. So you identify you had somebody in slavery. Well, okay. What he lost in wages. Not what you lost, not your losses, what he lost in wages. Compared to what a white man was making at the time, 25 cents an hour, 10 cents an hour. Stop using all these old foolish excuses when you can help yourself, when you are spending over $1 trillion, over $8 trillion per year putting into this economy, but won't even extract 1 billion out of it for yourself, of your spending power.
Sorry, the time.
You're ridiculous making that. You're ridiculous making that argument.
Louise is
That you
telling
are
you you're
helpless to
over your
change your
time,
condition.
Glenn. Louise is trying to tell you you're over your time.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Could you not hear that?
I heard it, but then you muted again, so it was quick. I can take over again. Lynn, I don't know how many people are on the list, but you might want to consider having an end to the list soon.
There's no one on the list, so we could move to.
See, I could have finished that.
No, you overdid your time. It's not about nobody else being on the list. You have 2 minutes, period. You know the rules, Glenn.
Stanton, were you thinking of raising your hand?
I'm going to just use this time to also do my wrap up for when we come to the end of it. When I first moved to Austin, I moved here from Los Angeles. I was very familiar with the South, and even though it's Austin and not quite so Southern as other places in the South, it's still the South. And I became acquainted with a white attorney. He was someone who was my contemporary and my peer. And something had happened in the news regarding the arrest of a Nazi war criminal who was being tried at the age of 80 something. And his comment to me was, "Oh, how long are you going to keep the pain alive?" And I said, well, in my personal world history, it's very fresh and part of my daily life since I have a parent who's a survivor. And I said, and how long is the South and Confederacy going to keep its pain alive and promote Southern pride and white supremacy and, you know, whatever is restore the Confederacy, or whatever the slogan is. The South shall rise again. Excuse me, I've forgotten that slogan. And he kind of looked at me dumbfounded, like, my culture's culture, your culture's, you know, shite, to use the British pronunciation. And it was really shocking to me that I had this well-educated person express these views. So this is just my spiel on history. Yeah, you are doomed to forget it if you don't teach it and whitewash it. And I don't know if anybody here has ever gone to visit a concentration camp. It is not a pleasant place to go to, but it is definitely a living memorial to people who have been oppressed and were suffering. And it's nice to see that somebody's doing something about a building in Fort Worth. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Stanton. We might turn now to the wrap up. Sometimes we run over, and today we might finish early even, or certainly on time. Is that all right with everyone if we start the wrap up as Phyllis suggested? All right, is there anyone who has not spoken? Marva? Otherwise,
Nora?
Teresa? And Nora, okay,
And I don't think Greer did either.
that's true. Okay,
I'm just scanning, trying to remember who talked.
Teresa hasn't spoken either.
Yeah, she
Right.
said Teresa.
Oh,
Greer spoke.
No, I tried. to
No,
get her to
no, I
speak.
did not. I did not.
She had not raised her hand, although I thought she did. Okay. Marva, do you have anything to say today?
I enjoyed the meeting. Lots to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Marva. Greer.
Okay, there was a statement in the article that said people are willing to be a part of doing something about our past, learning from it instead of letting it overwhelm them and making sure it doesn't happen again. That's a great statement, but then this one building is not going to stop that from happening. But I believe what they're doing is a wonderful thing. I appreciate them repurposing it. But with things like this, the only people who are going to show up are the people who are like-minded. And we have to realize in order to fight racism, it requires risk. It's not going to always be kumbaya, we're all going to get along. There still needs to be truth in education, which needs to be factual teaching of the truth to everyone. Everybody's on this thing with CRT. CRT was never taught in schools, and history is factual, not theory. We got an anti-lynching bill, which basically requires us to be dead to get justice. But can the dead actually get justice? But we need a hate bill, which doesn't require us to be dead, and we can't get that. Basically, what I'm saying is all these things are nice, but until we get justice legislated by law and statutes in this country that have teeth to make things punishable, then nothing changes. I celebrated Juneteenth most of my life as a kid, once when I learned what it was. And I was taught that actually in school, and we celebrated it. But again, you give us Juneteenth, but we don't have a hate bill. Basically, that's 2 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll leave it at that.
Well, you can add to that in your wrap up, Greer.
That was her wrap up.
That's my wrap up right there.
Oh, okay.
All right, thanks.
Sorry. Nora.
She can have mine if she wants it. That's 1 minute.
Is that okay?
That's okay with me.
Okay. Basically, what I'm saying, there's no attempt of restoration or reparation to right the wrong that's been done to the people who built this country under the most brutal conditions that are affecting their descendants to this day. That's where the healing needs to be done. You have to repair the damage that stands here today. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Greer. Nora? Nora, are you there? Maybe she stepped away. We'll check back a little bit later. And Teresa, I know you're putting together your desk. Do you have any comments?
Ooh, yes, thank you. I mean, yes, I was putting together my desk, but I am so happy to take a break. When I first read this article, I was thinking that this is a wonderful, when we talk about you want justice, not for revenge, but purely for restorative purposes and how do we give reparations or whatever. I like that the energy is being used instead of for hate to help some of the populations and the inclusiveness of it and moving on, like repurposing that building for good and possibly helping the populations that were targeted for harm. I think it's a really good example of a restorative justice solution, even though it's not going through the courts, but we don't need to wait for the courts. We can have a sense of restorative justice without some law enforcement directing us to do that. Because honestly, it needs to be from the community outward.
Those are good points, from the community outward. I think now
Nora's back, and I just realized I didn't talk either. So
oh, Phyllis, I'm sorry.
I forgot about myself. So Nora's up.
I don't really have anything to add. Just Louise made the comment about not forgetting history as we might repeat it, and I'm just thinking I don't mind forgetting the history I was taught because I want to learn the truth, the real history. That's all.
Thank you, Nora. Phyllis, forgive me, I forgot you, I didn't include you either.
I forgot myself. So, I want to say, I think we have to move away from this binary either or way of thinking about things and move into, this building could be, it was a source of evil and bad things, and it can now be used to build community among people that the people who previously used that building wanted to divide. I think it's a little ironic that in the beginning of this meeting, Glenn told us he's 1/8 Choctaw and he wants all the white people to give him his property back. And then later he's mad about Black people wanting white people to give back what they stole. It's a little, doesn't make sense. So, white people do owe the Black community things, not just for the past, but for the present. And we need to remember that, and we need to do everything possible to make this a more equitable society. Hopefully we won't have a civil war, although I worry about that too. And I will not be on the side of those with the lack of melanation. I will not be on that side of the Civil War. So I hope that in these conversations we can, try to find common ground instead of finding ways to disagree with each other. And I do think, it's not fair to call someone who's wise and well thought out as having a foolish opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. Dee Dee, would you like to do your wrap up?
Sure. This meeting there's been a lot of opinions that have bubbled up in this meeting. And one thing, David Duke, I was kind of interested in Louise's comment because I was curious as to where he came from, because he did land in California. He lives in Fallbrook, which is the next county over from me. And he had issues buying his house there because people knew who he was. And he was the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan. He was the top guy. And some people that know he lives in that city won't buy a house in that city, which is kind of a hard decision to make because it's really a sweet little town. It's just that he lives there he has run for office and he's fooled around and won a couple of times. But other than that, he lives fairly quietly. Just everybody knows that's where he is.
That was your time.
That was my time. I'm done.
Thank you, Dee Dee. Nancy.
Oh, this was a very interesting discussion. You know, when we begin on any given topic, you know, it kind of takes on a life of its own. But as usual, instead of looking for positives, I heard more negatives than positives in this discussion. And it just seems like I was listening to the radio the other day and Scoot said negativity sells. That's why the news is the way that it is. And you see that so much in our meetings, that an article that was brought to focus on positive issues somehow got flipped around and we're still on negative issues. But it was a very good meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Marion.
I think this was a great discussion. I was sitting here thinking that we are visually minded creatures. And it seems that what we see resonates and is cemented in our brain more so maybe than other senses, the sense of sight. So when the citizens or visitors pass that site and they notice that this building has been renovated, they can say, oh, well, this used to be this horrible place. And now it's been turned into something that's positive and beneficial. So I think that's the way to look at it. What was perhaps a horrible, dreadful, despicable place is going to be turned into something that's purposeful and meaningful and will have a positive effect on the community. So thanks again for this great article.
Thank you, Marion. Pedro.
Yeah, hey, so I was just thinking I wanted to wrap things up with I think several people, Beatrice and Jean, apologized for emotionality, and I think I really don't think we should apologize for emotions. It's part of our humanity. I think that should be controlled for sure, but also honored by never ignoring or suppressing it. I think people tend to be more frank and honest when they are emotional, which is a good thing. And then lastly, just, you know, both of these fronts are really, really important. That investing in Black America, or doing what we can to promote and address the racial wealth divide, if we're not that close to reparations, which I believe we should have, you know, supporting Black businesses is a good thing, but also never forgetting the oppression and the history, because it continues to manifest itself in different forms as I mentioned earlier. And then just lastly, I just think people tend to get more emotional over disagreements than agreements. And so that's just the human condition, and be emotional. Thank you.
People are emotional because they care, right?
Absolutely.
Jean, would you like to wrap up?
I am technically challenged. Here in Montgomery County, we have enacted a bill, a law, which provides for an office of, I can't remember, racial equality and equity, and every bill that we pass is supposed to go to that office and be examined to ensure that it's inclusive, trying to make everybody more equal and inclusive in our county. And Glenn, I can't give you my land, but I do have an extra bedroom if you want to move up to Maryland. You're welcome. So everybody, I hope it's gotten cooler where you are, and I hope that that you enjoyed a beautiful day, and be joyful for what we do have. There's so much more that we need to get. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Francie?
Well, I would just say what I think I've heard other people say about the movements to eliminate books and things that deal with the true history of race, and having the building stands as a monument that I believe makes it harder to deny that these things happened, or that this is part of our history. So I'm glad the building wasn't burned down, although I could have envisioned myself standing there throwing a match on it if that was the decision. Fort Worth is an interesting city. I think it's gone through cycles of extreme conservatism to liberalism. After all, that's where Kennedy landed, because Dallas was a little bit too conservative. At that point in time, those two cities have switched back and forth a number of times in which one's the liberal city, which one's the conservative, which I find interesting. And that has nothing to do with our discussion, or very little, I should say. Just something that crossed my mind. That's it.
Thank you for your perspective. Louise?
Well, I do have to say, I think emotions is something that's brought us all here to these meetings. You know, if we had no emotions about race and inequities, we would not be here. And I just have to say, it just hit me, just listening to people and looking at your faces. You're all such beautiful, wonderful people. And I'm really happy that I've got to know you. I actually got a little teary-eyed, and I'm not an emotional person, normally that emotional, but it's a really wonderful thing that we do have here. And there have been times where I just want to be more of an activist, like I've got to do something. What can I do? What can I do? And it's actually what Glenn said is, yeah, maybe we could write a list of each other's cities and towns or areas of Black-owned businesses and banks, like do our own research, actually do something into researching some Black-owned businesses, websites, etc., and spread that at the next meeting, perhaps. So we've got to stay positive, but yeah, you've got to remember the hideousness of our history, and how we can, move on from that. That's it.
Thank you, Louise. Beatrice?
Great article, great discussion. I think it's, Glenn makes a good argument, but also it's not one or the other. Self-determination, self-sufficiency, supporting our groups and organizations, and advocating for legal responses, advocating for reparations, and so on. When I was PTA president of a school in DC with Brightwood, I immediately moved all of the funds to the industrial bank. And same thing with every other opportunity that I've had in a position of leadership, wherever, even making silk screening T-shirts for St. Mary the Angel School when I was the principal there, making sure that was an African-American owned business that did that work. So those kinds of things are extremely important. I think that's a responsibility. However, I do think we have to always advocate for the major changes, the federal government, the legal system, all of this. Don't forget that we can do both things. Like people are saying, chew gum and walk at the same time and not fall out and break you behind. But it was a great meeting, and thanks a lot. Lynn, you did a good job. You're hired. Okay, thanks.
Who was keeping the time on her?
I was.
You thought I went over, Glenn?
She went over very, very little. Who's next, Lynn?
Prejudice.
No, you need to not have this, Glenn. Chill out about this. We don't need that negativity and bickering.
Lynn, you unmuted yourself somehow.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
All right, we must not call each other out, please. We all are here in all our glory, and it's to be expected, but let us honor each other.
Is Glenn next? Oh, Greer did 2 minutes. Is Glenn the next one?
Glenn actually had us wrap up, and he got an extra minute from Cheryl.
Oh, you're right. Okay, then we're done with the wrap up.
Oh, then
No, she ain't caught me.
That was Greer who got the.
But that wasn't his.
Oh, I'm very sorry, Glenn. It's not a deliberate prejudice against you. I'm sorry. Please, Glenn, wrap up.
1 minute.
You know, this job is too big for me.
Okay, listen. I know everybody's intelligent people on the air, so I just thought I'll put a little levity in there when I say I was part Choctaw and y'all get off my land. That was a joke. All right. Now, about repurposing something, because it had an ugly past. We got plantations in Louisiana. I do not want the plantation repurposed. I want everything there that was there in slavery. I want to visit there. You know, I want that history to remain the way it is. So that's an emotional thought. We need to get rid of those things that have an ugly past. Rethink that. That's it.
I have a question, Glenn. I think it's almost my turn, and maybe I can ask my question. When you walk through the garden district and you see the kettles that sugar was boiled in, how do you feel about that? Should that be there as a decoration or as a reminder of the bad old days when the garden district was a sugarcane plantation?
Well, they could have kept it as a plantation for a reminder to me what it was like. I would want to see it. I would want to see it all.
Okay, thank you. My wrap up. I was thinking about the people who are working to. Oh, Cheryl, did you have a clarifying question?
I actually thought that you asked about that sugar pots that we see around town that people glorify into fountains and use in their yards as cute ornamentation. Lynn was, I thought, speaking about sugar pots that are on plantations in their historical place.
Well, the garden district was a sugarcane plantation before it was turned into the garden district. It was a live-a-day plantation.
Okay, thank you.
I'm an old tour guide. So I look at those and I don't know what to say to my French guests. Should they be there or should they not be there? I was thinking about the people who worked on this project. Some of them were dancers, some of them were Hispanics, and there was going to be a component of gay youth. And if these people can learn to accept each other and work together, they're going to learn from each other. And when the dancers have a big program and their clients come, they're going to see exhibitions in the building about civil rights. And they cannot use the building unless they welcome the gay youth there who are having meetings to support each other. So I think there can be some learning that takes place on an individual level. And that's why I like this very much. Amplify the voices, someone made the point of amplifying the voices when people work together. They do amplify the voices throughout the community. The stumble stones that have been placed throughout Europe, it's not only the Jews who work on those were initiated by non-Jews who recognize the culpability of their society and want to acknowledge what has been done to the Jews of these countries. As people have said, there are things we can do for each other, but there are things that are too big and they must be taken on by the government. And one doesn't preclude the other. Facts of history have to keep being acknowledged and made visible to those who don't know their history or who don't think that it's important. Otherwise, people like to say, it's a Black person's fault if he doesn't have the same wealth that my father has. He could have bought a house, he could have worked in a union, and he chose not to. If you know the history, you know there were structural impediments to creating a wealthier society. And that information has to be taught to every generation. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. There is, Stanton, a former concentration camp in France called Drancy. And I finally was able to go there, although it's not easy to get there. There's no good transportation. It was a gathering point for French citizens before they were sent to Auschwitz. It's on the northeast side of Paris, and 75,000 people went through Drancy, and only less than 3,000 came back. So it's still there, and there's a museum, and the barracks where the people were kept are about 5 stories high. There were a lot of people there at a time, and it's used now to house low-income people. The buildings were built by the French government before World War II as low-income housing, and then the Nazis and the French police repurposed it as a gathering point for Jewish people to be gathered before deportation. So there are a lot of ugly chapters of the Jewish Holocaust in every country. And I noticed in September, Burns, who's going to have a program on what we did during the Holocaust. Did we welcome Jews? Did we facilitate their departure from Europe? We need to be sure to catch that. I'm just rambling now. Thank everyone for reading the article and offering me your thoughts. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Lynn. You did a really good job.
Can I make